In this video, we'll be talking about the notes of the treble clef for the level 1 treble clef test. If we're looking at the staff, at the beginning of the staff, we have what we know from our vocabulary as the treble clef. All we're going to be doing now is figuring out how to figure out the names of the notes based on where they sit in the staff. There's some fun ways to do this, and by fun I mean super exciting. In the spaces, which are the areas in between our lines, we have F, A, C, E, or face. On the lines, and we know if something's on a line because a line is going right through it, we have E, G, B, D, and F. There's a lot of different ways to remember E, G, B, D, F. A lot of people use every good boy does fine. However, knowing boys, I don't think that's true, so it's harder to remember. My personal favorite is every good burrito doesn't fall apart, because it introduces us to our next concept, which is something called ledger lines. L-E-D-G-E-R, ledger lines. Ledger lines are lines that we add above and below the staff so that we can add more notes. As we know, our musical alphabet goes on and on forever, both directions. So, if our musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we know that after G comes another A, and then B and C, and so on and so forth. If we're going the other way, after A comes a G, F, E, and so on and so forth. So, we use ledger lines as our way of continuing on and on so that if we have notes that go higher than our staff or lower than our staff, we can still write them in our music. Our ledger lines follow the same pattern as if we're going up and down the scale. However, they don't follow the same E-G-B-D-F pattern. A common mistake that people make is the first ledger line above the staff, they start over again with E. You don't want to do that. All right, so that's why I like every good burrito doesn't fall apart, because it reminds us that we're going onto a whole new territory. So let's take a look at a few things. I like to think of finding a note as a three-step process. The first step, is it on a line or is it in a space? Let's say I put a note here. This note we know is on a line because there's a line going through it. Once we know if it's a line or a space, our second step is to determine which method we're going to use to find our note. We would have face or E, G, B, D, F. Because it's on a line, which one are we going to use? E, G, B, D, F. We always go from the bottom to the top, E, G, B, D, F. Whether we're naming the notes or whether we're giving the lines numbers. For example, this note here is on the 1, 2, 3, third line. So if we're looking at our E, G, B, D, F, we're starting from the bottom to the top with E, E, G, B. The third step is simply to find our note. And because we've gotten up to B and we now know that that's where this is, our note here is a B. Note that I'm using all capital letters for our note names. For whatever reason, at some point in our history, we decided that note names were going to be done with capital letters. So we do want to make sure that we use a capital letter when we're naming the note. Let's do another one as an example. Here's a note on the third space. We know it's the third space, again, because we count our spaces from the bottom up. 1, 2, 3. So this note in the third space, we know it's on in a space. We know that face is the system we use for finding the notes in the space. So from here we go F, A, C. We know that our answer is C, and so we would write a C here. Make sense? Let's now do some ledger lines. Let's say that I put a ledger line below the staff, and I put a note on it. Well, we know it's on a line, so that helps. Except our system, e.g. BDF, doesn't go this far down. So instead, we have to now use a little bit of logic. If we know that the bottom line is an E, and we know that our alphabet goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and back down, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, we can use the alphabet to figure out what our next note is. So if E is here on the bottom, and we're going down, we have to go backwards through the alphabet. So if we're here, and we need to go down 2, we have a C here. Now, why did we go down 2? Because we always alternate lines and spaces. There's never 2 lines next to each other, never 2 spaces next to each other. And every line or space alternation gives us a new note. So between a line here and a line here, what would we have to have? A space. So there's a theoretical note right here that we didn't put up here. And this note would be D, as in 1 below our E of the bottom line. Hopefully you're following me. I'm going to move over to another staff here. On this treble clef, or this staff, let's take a look at a couple more just as an example. Here's a note right above the staff. There's not a line going through it, so it's a space. Because it's a space, when we're going up, again, our FACE doesn't help us too much because it can't. Because we don't go that high. So we can do this a couple different ways. You can pick any note that you do know. So if we wanted to use face, and we know that this is an E, and now we're going up 2 notes, because one note would be our line, the next note would be our space. If we have E, we go up 2, our note here is a G. If we were to keep going, that next note would be an A. The space above the line would be a B. The next ledger line up would be a C. So as you can see, we can keep adding more and more ledger lines. Theoretically, there's a note up here. And we could figure that note out just by going through the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now we know that the note a gazillion lines above the staff is a C. On your test, you'll see questions in 2 different ways. I will both actually give you a note, and I will give you a letter. If I give you the note, your job would be to write in the note name. If I give you a letter, your job is to draw in the note. E is a little bit of a special case. It actually appears on the staff in 2 places. It appears on our bottom line and on our top space. You would draw in both of them. And that'll be in the instructions there on your test. The last way that you'll see questions is I will ask you, what is the note on the 3rd line? And I'll have it written out. So if we know that we're numbering from the bottom to the top, we have 1st line, 2nd line, 3rd line. We know that we're on a line, we're going to use E, G, B, D, F. So we have E, G, B. So we know that the answer to this question is B. I might also ask the same question, what is the note on the 2nd space, and so forth. Or what is the note on the 2nd ledger line above the staff? I'll ask you questions as far as 2 ledger lines below and 2 ledger lines above. So that's what you need to know for your test. My recommendation would be to make yourself some flashcards with a drawing of the staff on one side with a note, and on the back of it, the note name, and then that way you could do it either way. There's a lot of websites out there that have quizzes built in for you to practice this, and I'll put a link to just a couple of those in the description below the video. Good luck. If you have questions, always feel free to come ask me.